On the first day of September 1974, NBC premiered a television series about a family living on the Minnesota Prairie in the 1870s, based on the childhood memoirs of Laura Ingalls Wilder, produced and starred in by the man who had just spent 3 years playing Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza. Nobody expected it to last. The network gave it a 12-episode trial. Little House on the Prairie ran for 9 seasons, 204 episodes, and became one of the most internationally beloved family dramas in television history, airing in more than 100 countries and still running in syndication 5 decades after its premiere. It dealt with addiction, disability, poverty, racism, and death with a frankness that family television of the 1970s rarely permitted, and it did so consistently while maintaining the warmth and moral clarity that made it possible to watch with children. Today, its creator is gone, and so are several of its most significant cast members. Others are still very much here. This is where they all ended up. Number 1 is Michael Landon, who created the show, produced it, wrote most of its best episodes, directed more than any other person on the production, and played Charles Ingalls, the father at the center of everything, for all 9 seasons. He was born Eugene Maurice Orowitz on October 31, 1936, in Forest Hills, Queens, New York, and by the time he put on the bib overalls of Charles Ingalls, at age 37, he had already been in American living rooms for 14 consecutive years as Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza. The transition from Western outlaw country to prairie farming family was so complete that viewers accepted it without question, because what Landon brought to both characters was the same essential quality: a man who believed in people and paid a price for that belief and kept believing anyway. What most viewers never knew is how completely Charles Ingalls was Landon's own self-portrait. He had grown up in a household defined by instability, a mother who attempted suicide in front of her children, a father whose priorities did not align with his family's well-being, a childhood defined by shame and the desperate need to become someone different. He became Michael Landon because he needed to become Michael Landon, and then he spent 30 years on NBC playing men who were the fathers he had not had. The decency was not performance. It was aspiration, sustained over decades, presented weekly to 30 million people who watched it and felt it and brought their children to watch it too. He smoked 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day throughout the Bonanza and Little House years. He drank heavily in the earlier part of his career. The physical costs of both habits arrived together in early April 1991, when severe abdominal pain he had been ignoring for weeks finally sent him to a doctor. A CT scan revealed inoperable pancreatic cancer that had already spread to his liver and lymph nodes. His response was to invite reporters to his Malibu ranch and tell them himself before the tabloids could construct a version of the story he didn't control. Then on May 9, 1991, he appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and talked about it with humor and without self-pity. He described his treatment regimen, including coffee enemas and carrot juice, with complete deadpan and made Carson laugh. He asked his fans to pray for him. He meant everything he said. Michael Landon died on July 1, 1991, at his home in Malibu, California. He was 54. His urn is entombed at Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City, California, the same cemetery where Lorne Greene, his television father on Bonanza, is buried within walking distance. The boy from Forest Hills, who became Little Joe and then Charles Ingalls, spent 30 consecutive years on NBC, telling America that people were worth believing in. He is at Hillside now, near the man he called his father, in the hills above the city, where he made himself into someone he could live with. Number 2 is Victor French, who played Isaiah Edwards, the rough-edged, warm-hearted neighbor and friend whose presence gave Charles Ingalls a counterpart of equal moral seriousness and considerably more comedic potential, and who was Michael Landon's closest friend from the moment they met on the set of Bonanza in 1969 until the lung cancer took French 2 years before the same disease took Landon. He was born Victor Edwin French on December 4, 1934, in Santa Barbara, California, the son of Ted French, an actor and stuntman who appeared in westerns in the 1940s and with whom Victor eventually appeared together in a 1966 episode of Gunsmoke. He followed his father into the business and spent the 1950s and 1960s working as a stuntman and bit player in Western television, accumulating 39 guest appearances in various series before Bonanza gave him a scene with Landon and changed the trajectory of both their careers. What most viewers never fully understood about the French-Landon friendship is its depth and its equality. Landon was the bigger star, the creator, the executive producer, the man whose name appeared at the top of the call sheet, and whose vision organized organized everything on the Little House set. French was his peer in every other respect, someone with whom Landon could be entirely unguarded, someone who gave back as much as he received. French directed episodes of Little House. He left the show from 1977 to 1981 to star in Carter Country, his own series, and when it was canceled, Landon invited him back to Walnut Grove without hesitation. When Little House ended in 1983, Landon immediately cast French in Highway to Heaven, giving him 5 more years of work and 5 more years of their daily collaboration. Both of them were heavy smokers. Both of them were diagnosed with lung cancer in the same period of time. Both of them died at exactly 54 years old. Victor French died on June 15, 1989, at Sherman Oaks Community Hospital in Los Angeles, 3 months after a lung cancer diagnosis made while he was filming live-action segments for an animated film in Dublin, Ireland. He was 54. He had arranged for an airplane to fly over his funeral, trailing a banner that read, "Eat shit, love Victor," a piece of final comedy so perfectly in character that everyone who knew him would have recognized it immediately. Michael Landon outlived him by 2 years. His burial location is in Los Angeles, the city where the friendship had begun 20 years earlier. The banner is the thing people who loved him remember most. He wanted to make people laugh on his way out, and he did. Number 3 is Karen Grassel, who played Caroline Ma Ingalls, the mother, the moral steadiness, the woman whose patience and grace were the domestic foundation on which Charles Ingalls' ambitions were built, and who is alive in 2026 at age 81, having spent decades since the show being considerably more visible about the professional realities of working in 1970s Hollywood than most actresses of her generation were willing to be. She was born on February 25, 1944, in Berkeley, California. She studied at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art after her undergraduate work, built a substantial stage career in New York and regional theater, and came to Little House on the Prairie as a serious theatrical actress, taking a television job because the television job was the one being offered. What most viewers never knew is the financial reality of her years on the show. She later disclosed publicly that for the first several seasons, she was earning considerably less than Michael Landon, and that the disparity was not connected to any difference in their screen time or their importance to the production. The negotiation of her contract was, she has said, a sustained exercise in being undervalued in a context where there was no particular mechanism for complaint. She left the show during its final season in 1982 and has been candid in interviews about the reasons, a combination of creative exhaustion and a working environment that she described as increasingly difficult. She served as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. She has published a memoir. She is, at 81, one of the most publicly reflective surviving cast members about what the show actually was and what it actually cost to make it. If these stories mean something to you, please subscribe. Every detail in this script was verified. Your subscription keeps this channel alive. Number 4 is Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, the girl through whose eyes the entire story was told, whose freckles and pigtails and determination became one of the defining images of 1970s American family television, and who is alive in 2026 at age 62, still working, still publicly engaged with the show's legacy. She was born on May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles, California, adopted as an infant by comedian Paul Gilbert and actress Barbara Crane. She was 11 years old when Little House on the Prairie cast her as Laura Ingalls, and she spent her adolescence on the Simi Valley Ranch where the show was filmed, growing up in front of 30 million viewers across 9 seasons. What most viewers never knew is the gap between the show's idealized family values and the personal reality of many of the child performers making it. Gilbert has written candidly in her memoir, Prairie Tale, about her struggles with addiction in the years following the show, a pattern she has connected directly to the particular pressures of childhood celebrity and to the loss of structure that followed the show's end. She has said, Laura Ingalls to the world for 9 years and had to figure out who she was to herself afterward. She served as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. She appeared alongside Richard Thomas in a 2022 Walton's Thanksgiving special. She is one of the most actively engaged keepers of the Little House legacy and appeared in promotion for the Netflix reboot that premiered in July 2026. Number 5 is Alison Arngrim, who played Nellie Oleson, the snobbish, scheming, impossibly irritating daughter of the Olesons, who became one of the most reliably entertaining antagonists in 1970s family television, and who is alive in 2026 at age 64, having built a second career as a comedian, writer, and AIDS activist that made her considerably more interesting than the character she played. She was born on January 18, 1962, in New York City, the daughter of two performers. She was 9 years old when she was cast as Nellie and played the role for 5 seasons, leaving in 1981. She has written about the experience of playing Nellie Oleson, including the surprising fact that she found playing the villain more fulfilling than playing a sympathetic character, because the freedom to be comprehensively awful on screen was considerably more interesting than being good. What most viewers never knew is that Arngrim was sexually abused as a child by a family member during the years she was playing Nellie Oleson, a fact she disclosed publicly in her 2010 memoir, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, and in subsequent advocacy work for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. She has also been a prominent activist for HIV and AIDS awareness since the epidemic began, motivated in part by the loss of her closest friend Steve Tracy, who played her on-screen husband Percival Dalton, and who died of AIDS in 1986 at age 34. She is one of the most honest voices from the show's history about the distance between what appeared on screen and what was happening in the lives of the people making it. Number 6 is Katherine MacGregor, who played Harriet Oleson, the insufferable, social-climbing, magnificently unself-aware shopkeeper's wife, who constituted the show's most reliable comic antagonist for nearly a decade, and who brought to that role a theatrical discipline and a comedic precision that made Harriet Oleson one of the most memorable television villains of the 1970s, despite the role's fundamental absurdity. She was born Dorley Dean MacGregor on January 12, 1925, in Glendale, California, and built her professional life first in New York, on and off Broadway, working under the name Scotty MacGregor, before Hollywood and Little House on the Prairie eventually claimed her. What most viewers never knew is where the character of Harriet Oleson actually came from. MacGregor drew on specific theatrical training in the creation of physical comedy, the posture, the expressions, the walk, and maintained that what made Harriet recognizable across 9 seasons was the consistency of the physical choices underneath the surface performance. She had not been able to appear in the show's series finale in 1983 because she was on a pilgrimage to India, having embraced the Hindu faith in her later years. She spent her final years at the Motion Picture and Television Fund's home in Woodland Hills, California, where she had been a resident for some time before her death. Her on-screen husband Richard Bull, who played Nels Oleson, had been a resident of the same facility and died there in 2014. After his death, MacGregor had lunch with Bull's widow, Barbara Collentine. MacGregor reportedly told Dean Butler that she and Mrs. Collentine had both agreed they had lost a wonderful husband. Katherine MacGregor died on November 13, 2018, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles. She was 93 years old. Her burial location has not been publicly documented. Harriet Oleson spent 9 seasons being the most self-satisfied woman in Walnut Grove. Katherine MacGregor spent her final years in a community care facility, having lunch with her on-screen husband's widow, finding the grace in the ending that Harriet Oleson never would have managed. Number 7 is Richard Bull, who played Nels Oleson, Harriet's long-suffering husband, the shopkeeper whose patience with his wife constituted one of the show's most sustained pieces of quiet comedy, and who was, in the estimation of everyone who worked with him, among the most professionally reliable and personally decent members of the entire cast. He was born Richard William Bull on June 26, 1924, in Zion, Illinois, served in the military, built a career in stage and television work across 4 decades, and brought to Nels Oleson a dignified, slightly mournful resignation that made every scene with Katherine MacGregor land twice as hard. He was the straight man to her comic excess, the still point around which Harriet's chaos organized itself, and he played that function for 9 seasons without once making it feel like a function. Richard Bull died on February 3, 2014, at his home in Calabasas, California. He was 89. He had been a resident of the Motion Picture and Television Fund's home alongside Katherine MacGregor in his later years. She outlived him by 4 years. His wife, Barbara Collentine, was at his side. They had been married since 1948, 66 years. On the Los Angeles hospital, with an airplane trailing a farewell banner overhead, in a Woodland Hills facility where on-screen rivals had lunch together, and in the ongoing careers of people who grew up on a Simi Valley ranch and never entirely left it behind. Michael Landon at Hillside, near the man he called his television father, Victor French in Los Angeles. The banner still the funniest thing anyone said at the funeral. Katherine MacGregor in an undocumented location, the Queen Bee of Walnut Grove, at peace at last. And several of them are still here. Karen Grassel at 81, still speaking honestly about what the show was. Melissa Gilbert at 62, still promoting it, still shaped by it. Allison Arngrim at 64, still turning Nellie Olison's comprehensive awfulness into something useful. Advocacy, comedy, honesty about the distance between what appeared on screen and what was happening behind it. A Netflix reboot premiered on July 9, 2026. A new Laura Ingalls is walking across the prairie. The people who made the original show are watching. Some of them are still here to do it. Some of them are watching from somewhere else. Michael Landon cannot witness the revival he never knew was coming, but 30 million people who watched him play Charles Ingalls would recognize immediately what he was trying to say, because he said it the same way for 30 years, and nobody who watched it has entirely forgotten. If these stories meant something to you, leave a comment below. Tell me which one hit hardest. I read every reply.